Here's what I think is the most underrated season of the Clone Wars TV show. It's not Season 7, which everyone knows is incredible, mostly because of the Siege of Mandalore. It's not Season 5, which may or may not be the best, but I'll get to that later. It's actually Season 6, the one that got cancelled, quietly released on Netflix, and barely mentioned in most rankings. While I don't think it's the best season, I think it contains the most emotionally devastating arc in the entire run of the Clone Wars. And I want to explain why by ranking every season of the Clone Wars TV show from worst to best. Before I get into the rankings, let me explain what I'm measuring each season on. I'm judging three main things. First, how consistent the season is overall. Second, how high the ceiling is on its best arcs. And third, how much it contributes to the larger Star Wars story. A season can have an all-time great arc and still rank lower if the surrounding episodes are weak. And a season that never quite reaches the highest highs but never wastes your time can still rank very high. Now, with that being said, let's get into it. Coming in at number 7 is Season 1. I want to be very clear about something. Season 1 is not bad at all. It's an extremely necessary part of the Clone Wars, and it introduces the world, establishes Ahsoka Tano before she becomes, in my opinion, one of the greatest Star Wars characters of all time, and builds out the Republic side of the war in a way that pays off significantly later. However, when you measure it against the rest of the series, it's clearly the most uneven season. For very strong episodes, there are episodes that feel made for a much younger audience, which is fine, but that just means the stories aren't as drawn out or complex as some of the other better arcs in the show. The ceiling is lower in Season 1 than anywhere else in the series, and the floor drops further too. I really think if you went back and removed the season number from each episode, you'd really be able to identify most of Season 1 just by how much lighter the stakes feel. The show hadn't found its voice yet, and that's okay, because what it became afterward justifies sitting through the growing pains. Here are some of the standouts in the season. Ambush is a great standalone Yoda episode and tells you what the war is actually costing the Republic. And the Ryloth arc, which contains Innocence of Ryloth and Liberty on Ryloth, which uses a civilian perspective to make the war feel real. These are episodes that show you what Season 1 could have been throughout. At number 6, I have Season 2, and this is where the Clone Wars really starts finding its identity. Season 2 is noticeably more confident than Season 1, and the writing is tighter, the stakes feel more real, and most importantly, this is the season that introduces Cad Bane as a reoccurring villain. And honestly, Cad Bane might be the best non-Sith antagonist the show ever produced. A cold, calculating bounty hunter who consistently outsmarts the Jedi, and he fills a role in this show that no other character quite manages. Season 2 also introduces Mandalore in a serious way through Pre Vizsla and Death Watch, a political conflict that pays off in some of the best arcs across Season 3, 4, and 5. The reason Season 2 sits at 6 rather than higher is simply that it just doesn't reach the absolute ceiling the later seasons hit. It's very good throughout, but the moments that are great here are slightly below what the show eventually achieves. Notable episodes include Holocron Heist, which is Cad Bane's introduction and honestly is the best character debut in the series. We also get the Mandalore plot, which is the start of one of the most important long-running storylines, and Death Trap, the young Boba Fett arc that closes the season with real emotional weight. We also get Episode 10, The Deserter, which is an amazing Solo Rex episode that really gives us the ins and outs of what happens when clones don't agree with the war. Moving on to the next season, at number 5, I have Season 6. Season 6 was produced after the show was canceled by Cartoon Network. It's only 13 episodes, and it was released quietly on Netflix under the title The Lost Missions, and a lot of the fans didn't even know it existed for years. But here's what those 13 episodes actually contain, and the reason I think it's the most underrated season in the entire series. It contains the Fives arc, 4 episodes following Clone Trooper Fives as he uncovers the true purpose of the inhibitor chips. This, in my opinion, is the most emotionally devastating sequence in all of Clone Wars. Fives gets so close to the truth. He comes within one conversation of potentially stopping Order 66, and the system around him was always designed to make sure he couldn't reach anyone in time. I really do think the Fives arc is some of the best storytelling ever made in Star Wars. The tragedy hits differently once you've seen Revenge of the Sith because you know exactly what's coming and you watch someone almost stop it. The season also ends with a Yoda arc that connects directly to how he eventually communicates from beyond death. In my opinion, it's ambitious, philosophical, and deeply underrated. The reason it sits at 5 rather than higher is purely based on episode count. 13 episodes simply couldn't match a full season's worth of range. Notable episodes include Conspiracy, Fugitive, and Orders, which is essentially just the Fives arc. episodes 1 through 4 of this season, and if you watch nothing else from season 6, watch these. Also, Voices, Destiny, and Sacrifice, which is the Yoda arc that closes the season and goes places most Star Wars content won't. At number 4 is Season 4. I feel like for half of the Clone Wars fans, this is going to be a massive surprise, and for the other half, they're going to say that's the most common pick of all time. This season is so hit or miss for me that it's almost frustrating, because in one hand, it holds a top 3 arc in the Umbara arc, which is 4 episodes on a dark, hostile planet under the command of a treacherous Jedi general, and it has some of the darkest, most morally complex storytelling Star Wars has ever produced. But it also has episodes like Episode 5, Mercy Mission, or Episode 6, Nomad Droids. Don't get me wrong, I love C-3PO and R2-D2 as much as the next person, but the standalone episodes, when it's just them, are just a bit slower, a bit boring. They're not as much into the lore as some of the other episodes, and honestly, that's what I like out of my show. And then, again, on a third hand, the end of the season is one of the greatest endings to a season of all time. It has episode 19, Massacre, which shows what happens when you wrong Count Dooku, especially when you're Asajj Ventress. And then you have episode 21 and 22, which is Brothers and Revenge, which leads into maybe the greatest season of all of Clone Wars, but again, we'll get to that later. And then some of the middle episodes in this season are also good, but again, they just don't dive into the lore as much as I would like them to, which is why it only sits at 4 for me. If you're enjoying this breakdown, go ahead and like, comment, subscribe, all those good things. It genuinely helps the channel, and I'd really appreciate it. I cover Star Wars content like this regularly. Now let's get into the top 3. And then at number 3 is Season 3. This was a really difficult one to place because Season 3 sits alongside some of the most creative arcs in the show, and at the same time, some of the most frustrating filler. I would say it's very similar to Season 4, except it doesn't have as many bad episodes, or more so, not great episodes. I really don't think any episodes in the Clone Wars is bad. On the creative side, the introduction of the Night Sisters and Savage Opress is legitimately excellent Star Wars storytelling. Bringing in Dathomir, watching Savage Opress be created as a brutal force of nature, and setting up Darth Maul's return in a way that feels earned. That whole trilogy is outstanding. Also, the Mortis arc, which contains Overlords, Altar of Mortis, and Ghosts of Mortis, is phenomenal. I cannot tell you how many times I have seen this arc. And then directly after the Mortis arc, we get the Citadel arc, which contains episode 18, the Citadel, 19, Counterattack, and episode 20, Citadel Rescue. This is the most creative arc in this season, in my opinion. I know Mortis kind of gets out there, but the Citadel is such an interesting take on a separatist prison. We also get Tarkin in his younger years as Captain Tarkin. It's all just phenomenal. At number 2, I have Season 7. I really want to be honest about this one because Season 7 contains both the greatest arc in the entire series and some of the most disappointing episodes in the same run. The Siege of Mandalore, the final 4 episodes of Season 7, and the entire show is some of the best Star Wars ever made in any medium. The animation quality is completely different from anything that came before it. Ahsoka Tano and Darth Maul facing off against the backdrop of Order 66 happening in real time, Ahsoka being unable to save her clone brothers, and Rex fighting the temptation to kill his own brothers. It's extraordinary television. But now on to why it's number 2. The Trace and Rafa arc in the middle of the season. 4 episodes following 2 civilian sisters on Coruscant nearly brings the entire season's momentum to a complete stop. It arrives at exactly the wrong moment. You're awaiting the Siege of Mandalore, and instead the show pivots to a storyline that feels disconnected from everything it's been building. And the Bad Batch opener is amazing. Those 4 middle episodes are what cost this season the number 1 spot. Notable episodes for Season 7 include the Siege of Mandalore arc, which is non-negotiable, Old Friends Not Forgotten, The Phantom Apprentice, Shattered, and Victory of Death. Please watch all 4 back-to-back. And then honestly, the entire Bad Batch arc is also phenomenal. And at number 1, my pick for the best season in all of Clone Wars is Season 5. It comes down to one thing: consistency combined with a finale that I think is the single greatest piece of character writing this show has ever produced. Season 5 doesn't have a bad arc. It opens with Maul fully returned and taking control of Death Watch to seize Mandalore, and The Lawless, the episode where Darth Sidious personally arrives to deal with Maul, is one of the most exciting episodes of Star Wars television ever made. Watching Sidious fight both Maul and Savage Opress simultaneously while also making clear he was never remotely threatened, it does for Sidious in animation what the Rogue One hallway scene does for Vader. It tells you exactly what kind of power you're dealing with. But the reason Season 5 is number 1, in my opinion, is the Ahsoka arc that closes it. The Wrong Jedi. The Season 5 finale is one of the most emotionally effective pieces of Star Wars storytelling ever made. Ahsoka Tano, accused of a crime she didn't commit, put on trial by the Jedi Order, abandoned by almost everyone she trusted, and then choosing to walk away even after being proven innocent. It completely reframes Anakin's eventual fall because you understand more deeply what the Order he gave everything to was actually capable of. Season 5 might have the best single episode, definitely has the best villain arc, and one of the most emotionally resonant finales. That's why it's number 1. Notable episodes include Revival, which shows Maul and Savage at full strength, Eminence, Shades of Reason, and The Lawless, which is the Death Watch Alliance arc. So here's where I land on the Clone Wars overall. I think it's one of the most undervalued pieces of Star Wars storytelling that exists, and I think that's partly because of how it was released and partly because people still associate it with a kids show. It stopped being that very quick. At its best, the Umbara arc, the Fives arc, the Siege of Mandalore, Ahsoka's trial, the Clone Wars is genuinely world-class storytelling. The groundwork for so much of what comes after, Ahsoka Tano as a character, Maul's arc, the tragedy of the clones, and the emotional context for Order 66, all of it lives in this show. I genuinely believe any Star Wars fan who hasn't watched the full series is missing a significant part of why this franchise works as well as it does. Let me know in the comments if you share the same opinion. Whether you agree that Season 5 is at the top, or if there's a season you think I've placed too high or too low. I'm really curious if anyone thinks that Season 6 deserves more credit than it gets. Otherwise, have a great rest of your day, and may the Force be with you. Always.